As I started my 5th semester at university, there was no doubt that with each passing day, the course became more exhausting due to the heavy and constant workload, which made it even more tiring. That day marked the return to classes, and we were assigned new teachers for all the subjects. In the corridors of the university, there was a rumor circulating among the male students. This rumor mentioned the arrival of an attractive English teacher. What excited me most was the fact that there was a great possibility that she was going to teach us. We hadn't met this teacher yet, but if the rumors were true, she would certainly be very attractive. The enthusiasm and excitement among all the men was palpable, lifting the spirits of every gentleman on campus. As the day progressed, the schedule became more and more intriguing. The English class was scheduled for noon, and everyone wanted to know if that beautiful teacher would be the one to teach us that semester. Finally, it was time. The anticipation was palpable in the classroom. All the men had combed their hair and adopted a physical posture of seduction. Everyone was eager for the good news, and to see that woman walk through the classroom door. The miracle happened. A sensual woman, with an impressive and sexy figure, walked through the door. She was wearing leggings that highlighted her sculpted legs and beautiful hips. Her hair was light brown, her face very pretty with big eyes. She was all Latin fire. Her name was Paulina. The enthusiasm that vibrated in that classroom was evident. If we had been allowed, we would have shouted and celebrated. I'm sure everyone would have. The comments we heard about this teacher did not do justice to her presence. At the end of the class, all of us men got together to share our impressions of her. We all agreed that she was the ideal woman, the woman every man dreams of. Unfortunately, we saw her as unattainable. One of the rumors was that she was 35 and apparently single. She was the talk of the classrooms. One day, during one of the school's soccer tournaments, most of the men from the university got together. During the conversations, it was obvious that they were talking about this teacher. One colleague, visibly upset, raised his voice and expressed his weariness at constantly hearing about her. He mentioned that no one was brave enough to ask her out and make her their girlfriend. The discussion became heated and the argument between everyone present escalated. Suddenly, the colleague raised his voice even higher, saying that if everyone present considered themselves so masculine, they should win the teacher's heart. He proposed a bet. Whoever managed to win the teacher's heart would win the prize money accumulated by all the participants. Most people accepted, handing over the money to the partner who would win the prize. The bet had no deadline for the feat to be accomplished. The only rule was that the man who won over the teacher would have to take a public test to prove his feat to everyone. The money wagered would be given to the person who succeeded. At the university, everyone began to look their best. The men were carefully groomed and perfumed, looking for the best opportunity to get close to her. Everyone wanted to ask her out and win her heart. Unfortunately, many of the soldiers of love fell one after the other. They were rejected in their attempts. She had a strong character and categorically refused every invitation that came her way. It became increasingly difficult to get close to her and even more difficult to arrange a romantic date. 3 months passed and it seemed that no one would win the bet. Most of the men had been rejected and hadn't even managed to exchange a few words with her. The few men who hadn't tried to approach her were quite frightened by the results they saw on a daily basis. I was one of them, and I was too afraid to approach the professor, because I knew that rejection would be devastating for my self-esteem. Across the road from the university was Donna Faustina's restaurant, an older woman who worked with her daughters. All the students used to go there to eat stews of the day or delicious cakes. One afternoon, while I was eating there, my gaze turned to a small shelf at the back of the restaurant. On it was a goat's skull with 2 bronze coins in the eye holes and a red ribbon with papers on each of the horns. The papers mentioned a few words, and, in the center of the skull, there was a metal pentagram. Although the skull had been there all along, I had never paid enough attention to it. When I looked at it closely, I felt an exceptionally heavy energy emanating from it. I felt a chill as I kept my gaze fixed on the object. Mrs. Faustina was sitting in a chair in front of the television. I decided to approach her and ask about the meaning of the skull and why she kept it in her store, in plain sight. I asked Donna Faustina if she could give me some explanation about the skull. She said she had a secret she wanted to share with me. She confessed that the skull was imbued with witchcraft and that, at one point, she had thought about closing her restaurant. However, since she had placed the skull, things had improved. His whole family was now working there and they were doing well. I asked her if she could vouch for the fact that witchcraft really worked, and she nodded emphatically. At that moment, I devised a plan to win the bet. I told Mrs. Faustina that, for the last few months, I had been doing very badly at school. My grades were low, my performance was not good, and an inexplicable tiredness was affecting my productivity. I mentioned that strange things were happening to me that often ended in tragedy. Donna Faustina suggested that perhaps I needed a cleansing and that a visit to a witch she knew was necessary. This witch, she said, could help me remove all the bad energy that was affecting my well-being. She took out a notebook and wrote down an address, asking me to mention that I was going on her behalf. As this witch didn't see people without a recommendation, I thanked her for her help and went to finish my meal. I had deliberately lied in order to get the contact details of someone who could help me perform the witchcraft. I had heard that it was possible to make people fall in love through witchcraft, and I wanted to see for myself. If I succeeded, I would win a good amount of money from the bet. 2 days later, I went to the address provided to visit the witch. When I arrived, I was greeted by a woman who didn't look old, perhaps in her 50s. I told her that I was coming on behalf of Donna Faustina and that I needed her help. Before entering, she asked me what exactly I wanted to do. My voice shook a little, because the atmosphere in the place was oppressive and the air was filled with various strange scents and circumstances. The place was not devoid of beauty, nor did it display symbols or deities, but it managed to transmit a dense energy. I took a deep breath and moved on to the main point of the conversation. I told the lady my true intentions. I wanted to make someone older than me fall in love. She gave me a thorough appraisal and said that it was possible to create a bond with anyone. However, she perceived in me a strong economic interest and the search for social validation as the motivators for my desire to conquer this woman. I was surprised at how the witch deciphered my motivations. The witch asked me to be honest and provide all the details, as this would determine the type of witchcraft we would do. I shared with her the bet I was involved in and confessed that I was physically attracted to the teacher. However, the witch was direct in pointing out that I wasn't really in love with her, but that my main motivation was to make money and possess her. She warned me about the consequences of slavery, which always involved a price to be paid. Despite this, I declared my willingness to proceed. To begin with, we needed to get an item from the teacher. Although I didn't pay much attention to his words, my only interest was to win over the teacher, win the bet, and gain recognition at the university. I said goodbye to the witch, promising her that I would return with an item from the professor. Back at home, I started thinking about how to get that item of clothing. At that moment, I had an idea and decided to give it a try, as I had nothing to lose. The next day, I arrived at the university and decided to go to the parking lot exclusively for professors. I identified the professor's car and was lucky enough to see one of her coats on the back seat. I looked around to make sure no one was watching me, walked over to a flower bed, picked up a large stone and approached the car again. I threw the stone at the rear window, smashing it into 1,000 pieces, and quickly went inside to get my coat. When I picked it up, I measured the distance and ran out of the parking lot. That day, I chose not to attend classes due to a mixture of nervousness and fear of what I had done. However, the adrenaline was rushing through my body, so I decided to go immediately to the witch's house. I knocked on her door and she greeted me, inviting me in. I handed her my coat and indicated that I was ready to start my witchcraft work. We went over to a table, where the witch spread out the coat and, with a pair of scissors, cut out a small square of fabric. She then took a t-shirt of mine and cut a piece of fabric from it. She put the 2 squares of fabric together by rolling them up and tying them with a ribbon. Then she put them in a small red velvet bag. He lit the copal and passed the bag over the aromatic smoke of the brazier, reciting a few words in a strange dialect. Finally, he concluded by saying, "What is united at this moment, nothing can separate, and if one day it is separated, may the one who has it pay the price." After completing the incantation, the witch explained to me that this little bag would be my amulet and that I should always carry it in my right pocket. She emphasized that I should never get rid of it. She then asked for patience and a few days for the amulet to start working. I paid her the agreed fee for her services and returned home, eagerly awaiting the first results. Exactly 3 days passed and I was sitting waiting for English class to start. When the teacher entered the room, I was very nervous. However, to my surprise, the first thing she looked at when she walked through the door was me. She kept her gaze fixed on me as she made her way to her desk. The lesson began and I noticed that she subtly hid her attention from me, although it was clear that she occasionally glanced at me before turning her attention back to the blackboard. At the end of the lesson, all the students started collecting their belongings to go home. However, the teacher mentioned my name out loud and asked me not to leave, requesting 5 minutes of my time. My classmates were surprised and looked at me when the teacher and I were left alone in the classroom. I asked her why she wanted to talk to me, since my English grades weren't bad and I didn't see any reason for it. Deep down, I wished that she loved me and that this was the moment when she would ask me to kiss her passionately. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. "Alonso Perez, why did you break my car window and steal my coat?" I discussed this situation with the counselors and found a way to repair the damage. "I expect you here tomorrow, Saturday, at 10 a.m. Don't forget to wear light clothes, as you'll have a lot of physical work to do." At that moment, I was surprised, but unfortunately I hadn't taken into account the surveillance cameras present in the parking lot. The next day, I arrived at the university in light clothes. She also arrived and was wearing pants that gave her a very simple, but at the same time very sexy appearance. She told me that we were going to move an old archive to one of the university's storerooms. She gave me instructions on how to do this. That's how I started paying for the damage I had caused to her car. 3 hours of this tedious work passed and suddenly the professor walked in. She asked me to follow her and we went to her car. She asked me to get in and mentioned that the work wouldn't just be at the school, as she was the main one affected. The cost she had caused to her car would also be paid for by repairing and pruning her garden. When I arrived at her house, she took me into the garden and again gave me instructions and some tools. I was very angry with that witch, because I was supposed to be holding her in my arms and all I was doing was being her personal gardener. After an hour of gardening, the teacher arrived with some beers. She told me it was time for a break. We sat at a table in the garden under the shade of a huge parasol and began to refresh ourselves with drinks. As we chatted, time flew by and before we knew it, we had been talking for an hour. The teacher looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know that right now you're my slave and you have to do everything I ask." She got up from her chair, left her beer on the table and came over to me. She leaned over a little, getting very close to my face. She started kissing me. I didn't know how to react. Such a surprise wasn't in my plans. The only thing that went through my mind was imagining all my friends watching this scene, imagining them applauding me. Encouraged by their support and adoration for this stunt, I decided to go with the flow and continued kissing her passionately. Our kiss went on for a long time and, when she finally broke away, she took my hand and we walked home together. We went upstairs and straight into the shower, while she began to undress slowly and tantalizingly. I did the same. This experience allowed me to see parts of her body that I had never imagined I would see, and I must admit it was incredibly pleasurable. Once inside the shower and under the comforting flow of water, we started kissing again and I enjoyed every part of his body like an unbridled animal, hoping that this moment of ecstasy that made me tremble and bend my legs would never end. Unfortunately, this small but exciting moment came too quickly because I wasn't used to feeling such a beautiful body, which caused me to orgasm quickly. She hugged me and comforted me, assuring me not to worry, as it wouldn't be the first time we'd be intimate together. There would be more occasions to improve my time record. After we had finished showering, we lay down on the bed. She mentioned that this was forbidden between the two of us and that we had to be very careful so that no one would notice. She was sure that she wanted us to continue seeing each other. A few months passed and I didn't mention anything to my partners, as I didn't want to lose the intimacy I had gained with this beautiful woman. However, the social validation I needed at that age wouldn't leave me alone. I had a strong need to shout and let people know about the relationship I had with that teacher. I couldn't get the image of all my classmates idolizing me out of my head. So I made a plan to show everyone what I had achieved. Summer vacation arrived and I mentioned to some of my classmates that I was already in a relationship with the teacher. You could say it was time to get the money back from the bet. So I called everyone to a shopping center and asked them to wait in the food court at 2 p.m. I would stop by so that everyone would be there. The agreed day arrived and I entered the mall accompanied by Paulina. We went to the food court and I could see a small crowd already waiting for the event. With everyone's eyes on me, I stopped my walk and took Paulina by the waist, approaching her and kissing her slowly on the mouth. She responded to the kiss, because by then she was already in love with me. When I finished kissing her, I could hear the cries of amazement and euphoria from the crowd in the background. I tried not to let her see the scene and took her to another area of the mall. That day, I received many calls and messages congratulating me on winning her over. At that moment, I felt like a man. The vacation ended and we went back to university. On the first day of classes, everyone was waiting for me at Donna Faustina's restaurant and we went to eat together. As we ate, they took out the money and started giving it to me note by note, while my friends counted the denomination of each of the notes they put in my hand. When the meal and the feast were over, everyone began to leave, leaving only me and two other friends. At that moment, Donna Faustina called me over and asked me to come over to where she was sitting in her chair, watching TV. I asked how I could help her, and Mrs. Faustina greeted me with a very irritated look on her face. I paid close attention and realized that I'm not an idiot. You're an idiotic brat. You tied up the teacher with witchcraft, and the worst thing is that you did it for money. This has terrible consequences. I told Mrs. Faustina not to worry so much, that I was beginning to like the teacher and that my intention was to stay with her for a long time. Mrs. Faustina didn't answer me and stopped paying attention to me. I decided to ignore her and left her establishment. The next morning, I received a call from the university management. When I got there, I saw Paulina sitting there. Someone had gone with the gossip from that establishment and also mentioned that Paulina and I were in a relationship. The director questioned the veracity of these facts. I denied everything, but it was too late. Paulina had told the whole truth. As a result, Paulina was fired from the university. She took that risk by agreeing with the director that I wouldn't be punished and that I could continue my studies. Paulina got up and left, winking at me. When I left class, I called her and asked to meet her at her house. I went there and, when I arrived, it seemed as if nothing had happened. On the contrary, she seemed happy. I asked her why she was like this, as if nothing had happened. She told me that she felt liberated and exhausted by keeping our relationship a secret. She argued that the best thing that could have happened was for the rumor to reach management, so that we could live our relationship without hiding it. Her perspective really appealed to me at the time. Back then, I was a young fool, dazzled by the beauty of a woman who offered me an intense relationship. The thrill of being with someone older than me was really exciting. But over time, things began to change. Gradually, she became a possessive woman. Over time, she tried to control me to the point of picking me up every day from college and constantly questioning whether I talked to other girls at college. My friends were thrilled to see that this beautiful woman was crazy about me. However, this situation was no longer funny, as they didn't know about the transformation Paulina was going through. Finally, Paulina proposed that I move in with her to continue her manipulation and keep me under control. Naively, I accepted, attracted by the intensity of our intimacy. Over time, however, the passion and desire disappeared and were replaced by jealousy and aggression on her part. One day, I decided to end the relationship because I couldn't take it anymore. In the middle of an argument, I told her I didn't want anything more to do with her and left her house carrying a suitcase with my clothes. But as I was crossing the road, I was hit by a motorcycle so hard that I fell unconscious in the middle of the road and had my leg broken. I woke up in hospital with my leg in a cast, and there was Paulina, who took me to the hospital for treatment. She was kind to me and promised to change her attitude and build trust in our relationship, so we decided to give each other another chance. One day, when we went out for breakfast at Donna Faustina's, she saw me arriving with my leg in a cast and walking with the help of 2 crutches. At that moment, she burst out laughing, came up to me and whispered in my ear, "You're paying a lot for that tie, aren't you? Let me guess. You broke off the relationship and immediately the accident happened to you, didn't it?" Her words really surprised me and made me wonder how Mrs. Faustina knew about it. She told me that she wouldn't give me any details, but that it would be better to ask the witch, as she would tell me everything I needed to know. With many doubts in my mind, I decided to visit the witch who had helped me tie up Paulina. I arrived at her house, opened the door and sat down. Just like the first time, she asked me why I was there and, before I could answer, she said, "Let me guess, you ended the relationship and immediately the accident happened to you, didn't it?" I was shocked and asked her how she knew what had happened. She explained that when she conjured up the bond, she asked the dark forces that nothing should separate us, that the bond would never be broken. However, if someone decided to leave the relationship and try to break the bond, they would have to pay with their lives. He told me that, in the accident in which I broke my leg, I was very lucky, because I was actually destined to die. I asked her if there was any way to break the bond, and she said no, that this was the price for having tied someone up for money, and that now I would have to spend the rest of my life by Paulina's side. I left the witch's house totally disillusioned by her words, because I had never imagined that I would have to live a life with Paulina. Over time, next to the woman I had tied up for desire and money, she became unbearable. She seemed to be sick with jealousy, anger and rage, which she unloaded on me with blows and dramas at any time and in any place. My attraction to her disappeared, and she was no longer the same person I had met at college. The part of her that attracted me no longer existed, and she seemed much older than me, as she was more than 10 years older than me. One day, in the middle of an argument in the bedroom, she told me that it would be better if we split up. She mentioned that she could no longer bear my infidelities. Although they had never existed, they were only in her mind as part of the neurosis she herself had created in an excess of anger, jealousy, and drama. Paulina abruptly ran out of the bedroom into the hallway and, as she tried to go down the stairs, she fell hastily, rolling down several steps to the first floor. She started screaming and I came to her aid from upstairs. I could see that she couldn't move completely. Apparently she had broken her hip. At that moment, I remembered the words of the witch and Donna Faustina, who said that whoever decided to leave the relationship would have to pay with their life. I realized that if the relationship ended, I would be destined for a life of torment alongside Paulina. I rushed downstairs to help Paulina and realized that she had become a burden to me, especially if she became incapacitated. In an impulsive and desperate act to free us from each other, I grabbed her neck with both hands and twisted it sharply until I heard the crack of its fracture. If anyone had to die to end our torment, it had to be Paulina. The police and experts determined that her death was caused by a fall from the stairs. I pretended to be sad to see her go, but I actually felt liberated. I rebuilt my life with another woman and started a family, but the guilt of what I had done consumed me. The memories of Pauline and her death haunt me, and I will carry this weight until the day I die. I deeply regret having tied Pauline up for money and having sought the attention of my friends. My stupidity haunts me, and this burden I will carry until the day I die.